right, what's going on, guys? So back with another stream. So I'm gonna be doing two stories to the two topics to cover today. A movie review for the Night of the Reapers, but beginning with the first big topic that I'm gonna talk about was Jimmy Kimmel's live show returns back to ABC the following Tuesday, and so he ends up breaking his silence on social media ahead of the show's return. So he basically is ending his social media silence, and at the late night prepares to return on the air Tuesday night. He posted on Instagram talking how for the first time since the show was suspended following the controversial comments he made about conservative commentator Charlie Kirk's killing. Kimmel shared a photo of himself with the legendary television writer and producer Norma Lear, along with the caption "Missing this guy today." And then there goes that. Let me go and read some more about that. All right, so now since he returned to the air for the first time since the show was suspended by the FCC, after FCC Chairman Brandon Carr criticized his jokes following the death of Charlie Kirk and threatened a regulatory action, here he comes on and he basically says, "You understand it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man," Kimmel said his voice breaking during his opening monologue. "I don't think there's anything funny about it." Disney took Jimmy Kimmel Live off the air last Wednesday after conservative fury over comments Kimmel made during the show monologue and after public criticism from the Trump-appointed chair of the Federal Communications Commission. And a furious backlash to ABC's decision followed, with prominent voices in and outside the entertainment industry saying that it amounted to an attack on free speech by the administration. And Kimmel said on Tuesday that the Trump administration tried to coerce the affiliates who run our show in the cities that you live in to take my show live off the air. That's not legal. That's not American. That's un-American, and it's so dangerous, he said. And Trump responded on Truth Social, questioning why would ABC want someone to come back who does so poorly, who's not funny, who puts the network in jeopardy by playing 99% positive Democrat garbage. And without providing any evidence, Trump accused Kimmel of being yet another arm of the DNC, saying that it would be a major illegal campaign contribution. And the events led to Kimmel's suspension began September 15th, 5 days after a gunman fatally shot Kirk, a populist activist on the right, as Kirk was at a public event in Utah Valley in Orem. Kimmel's comments came at a time when investigators had not released details about the suspect's potential motives. We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything he can to score political points from it. Kimmel said in an open monologue, Tyler Robertson, 22, was charged the next day with Kirk's murder. In the charging documents, prosecutors released next text messages in which they said Robinson said that he targeted Kirk because he had enough of his hatred. And during his monologue, Kimmel said it is not his intention to blame any specific group for the actions of what had obviously a deeply disturbed individual. He also praised Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, for saying that at a memorial Sunday that she has forgiven her husband's killer. She forgave him as an example we should follow. Kimmel said, emotion in his voice, "If you believe in the teachings of Jesus, as I do, that there was, that's it, and a selfless act of grace, forgiveness from a grieving widow, and it touched me deeply, and I hope it touches many," Kimmel said. "And if there's anything we should take from his tragedy to carry forward, I hope it can be that." And on Tuesday, at the El Capitan Entertainment Center, in Hollywood, where Jimmy Kimmel Live is taped. Ticket holders were eager to file to be in the audience. ABC suspended Kimmel's show after SEC chairman Brendan Carr described his monologue jokes as sickest conduct possible in an interview with conservative commentator Benny Johnson. Carr threatened regulatory action. Hours later, the Next Star Group said it would pre-exempt Kimmel's show for the foreseeable future on all of its ABC affiliate channels. Carr thanked Nexstar for doing the right thing on X and encouraged other local broadcasters to follow his lead. And Sinclair, another broadcast owner group, quickly followed Nexstar in saying that it would be pre-exempt Kimmel's show on 30 ABC affiliate stations. The companies reiterated this week that they would continue to do so. Both companies have pending business before the FCC, and Nexstar said that last month it intends to put in a bidding to buy another broadcast company, Tenga, which most likely required the FCC to loosen its 39% cap on national television audience reach, and Sinclair is exploring major options for its broadcasting businesses, according to CNBC. Democratic lawmakers on Tuesday wrote to corporate leads without Nexstar and Sinclair, asking their attention to pre-exempt Kimmel's show and may relate to regulatory issues pending with the Trump administration. And a spokesperson for ABC had initially said Kimmel's show would be pre-exempt indefinitely, sparking immediate backlash, with many decrying that they would describe as infringement on his constitutional right to free speech, and others calling a boycott of Disney-owned streaming services on Hulu, Disney Plus, and ESPN. Comedian, actor, and podcaster Mark Maron called on free speech advocates to speak out against pulling Kimmel's show. And if you have any concern, belief in freedom, or the Constitution of free speech, this is it. Maron said in a video on his Instagram account, "This is the deciding moment that this is what authoritarianism looks like in this country is happening." And Senator Ted Cruz, Representative of Texas, said Friday on his podcast while he thought what Kimmel said was wrong, what Carr was doing was unbelievably dangerous. And Senator Rand Paul called Carr's comments about Kimmel absolutely inappropriate in an interview on NBC News. Meet the Press on Sunday, Carr later denied that he threatened the station, saying Monday that he was referring to the FCC's ability to review a license because of new distortion complaint. And he said that Disney made his own business decision to pre-exempt Kimmel's show. And after days of mounting pressure, Disney said Monday that Kimmel will return to the air in a statement that did not address the freedom of speech concerns or the calls for a boycott. And Kimmel said in Tuesday's monologue that Trump has targeted his critics on late-night television to intimidate them and to bully corporations to remove them. And the President of the United States has made it very clear he wants to see me and hundreds of people who work here fired from our jobs. Our leader celebrates Americans losing their livelihoods because he can't take a joke, Kimmel said. We have to speak out against this, he said. All right. So as I was looking and as I saw to as I'm looking at this, reading this article on NBC News, and as I saw the ABC Jimmy Kimmel Live show at on that day to which they announced him coming back, and basically my thoughts about his comments that he made towards MAGA and the Trump administration, and in light of the fact of what happened with Charlie Kirk's death at a college campus at Utah Valley. I just didn't understand why the SEC chairman Brendan Carr and his commentary and his statements towards what Kimmel said, no matter what Jimmy Kimmel said, in a sense, and I kind of think it was at the wrong, inappropriate time. It was not enough for anybody to ever even remotely even combat to the point to even have a show taken off of the air. And for any light of the fact of the matter, comedians, like I said before, and I said this on my other page, which I talked about this similar story, talked about the same story. Comedians have a right to express their thoughts about politics and political platform and what's going on in the world, just as much as what we're seeing what's going on in the political landscape and the political climate. And Jimmy Kimmel is just one out of many comedian talk show hosts from Leno and David Letterman, Conan O'Brien, and several others who have had controversial, commentaries in the past, but were still allowed to be on air because, again, you didn't have this so-called like politically correct state of mind, this whole politically correct world that we're trying that they're in, and you didn't have a bunch of insensitive, dehumanitarian and inhumane individuals that are in corporate America right now and dirty capitalism in corporate America today running the show. Yeah, you had capitalism has always still been there, but at the same time, you didn't have people that are, you know, wanting to call out freedom of speech and violation of constitutional rights, but you're violating his constitutional rights, allowing him to speak on a national public platform and embarrassing him and his audience as it once knows because you see something, Brandon Carr from the FCC, that you don't like, that you got a call from somebody in higher up places wanting to have something to address, and I'm not a fan of Jimmy Kimmel because he's made controversial statements in the past about not just the similar things Charlie Kirk has said, but he's also made racial incentivized comments on like a bunch of group of races, a bunch of group of race and racial ethnicities, whether it be for the blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Dominicans. It don't matter. We've heard Jimmy Kimmel made controversial comments before in the past. So I'm not even remotely speaking as a fan of him or even watching his show all the time because I don't. But I feel like you're violating people's rights, especially talk shows, comedian talk shows, because it's their job to speak out, on a field in America to really get home where what improvements that the economy needs to be on. So for the fact that people in the higher ups had to get the FCC involved, meaning from Trump and his administration, kind of just shows you how much thick skin that they just don't have. They don't have thick skin, and they don't have no sort of as I'll say, cojones, like to really take things for face value and to not take things too seriously. And what I saw, there was nothing that Kimmel said or he stated in his comments about on September the 15th, I believe. There was nothing that he said, in my opinion, that warranted anything to take his show down or take his show off the air at that brief period in time. I just feel like people had a complete overreaction, and it goes to the point, and this is the same thing that they try to do to controversial statements that Dave Chappelle said about trans and about Jews in his last, I think, not the closure. And I think it might have been the stand up before that on Netflix. I can't remember exactly which one off the top of my head, but I know it wasn't the closure. I think it might have. But anyway, I can't remember the actual stand up right now. But they try to silence and say things and go after Dave Chappelle for some comments that he made about trans issues, which was actually remotely true. But what happens is when you speak out against a certain grouping and you speak out against a certain group of individual people, yeah, you basically have a way of like minutely taking you have a way of minutely and having a way of looking at it, a way of taking away somebody else's amendment rights of free speech, and at the end of the day, And they try to do this stuff to Kevin Hart when he wanted to host the Oscars. You know, some comments that he made on you know, in the confines in his own home, and it kind of just made it to the point where he had to go on Ellen DeGeneres and formally apologize, and they still didn't believe what he said. You know, they still couldn't take him seriously. So again, it goes to my fair point of relations to Jimmy Kimmel, that a lot of these comedians have a job to do, and they have a job to really get paid to really entertain their audience, entertain the public. You know, they have funny moments at times. You know, they'll say some things that'll pretty much piss off an audience, that'll, warrantedly, kind of get people in the uproar and the uproar, but at the same time, it'll get people in a debate. You know, that's the point of it. You know, to take commentary for face value and to not really look at it in a sense where it's seriousness, but it's all based in reality. I mean, George Carlin, who's one of the all-time greatest comedians to ever do it, I mean, he had the 7 words that you would never say on television. I mean, like I said, it's just so many. You can go and look back through history from so many different comedians and so many different talk show hosts that have had way worse commentary and controversial statements than what Jimmy Kimmel had ever said, and they still get to have their own freedom of right, freedom of press. They didn't have that, and especially from the 80s, from the late 80s, the early 90s, and even in the 2000s, you didn't have this so-called, dominant of both political parties, whether being conservative, the conservative right, or the liberals, or the left, controlling or dominating a narrative. And that's my problem with why you make so many idiotic moves by wanting to take Jimmy Kimmel show off the air, because you set a bad example for other talk show hosts. Even for the likes of Stephen Colbert, for example. That you and Jimmy Fallon. You kind of want to toe the line and control the narrative and bring everything in your own favor. So those are kind of like my thoughts on why this thing was just absolutely insensitive and just completely just disingenuous and disproportionately disrespectful. So tell me what you guys think also down in the comment section about Jimmy Kimmel addressing in his monologue on Tuesday, I believe, and his comments about the show, and his comments about Charlie Kirk and let's pretend, before I get on out of here, let me just, before I get to my next topic, Charlie Kirk is not a martyr at all. He was only a victim of his own words. He was only a victim of his own bidding. And when you go out into these conferences, these town hall meetings, and all these different things, right? You are a pundit. You are a media personality. You had the Turning Point USA, like you had your own organization, you had your own movement, and you had different YouTube political commentators on there. And while at the same time being on Fox News majority of the time, you pretty much are you are pretty much open into the limelight. You pretty much are open into whatever backlash of whatever commentary you have. You are opening you're opening the floodgates. Whatever kind of backlash will come back to you, especially the commentators you had about women's rights, transgender issues. Like, you are opening to you open the floodgates of your own bidding. And I'm not saying what Charlie Kirk, the killing, what happened is nothing about what happened was justified with that at all whatsoever. But in the same breath, let's not pretend like we can't go and separate the good with the bad, or with the good, bad, and the ugly, and put it all into its own retrospect. Is my point. Oh, hey, what? Oh, let me just look at the comments. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. And yes, freedom of speech is very important until the government and until people, get certain things that are not as not as important. They'll come down and crack down and try, especially if you have a bigger market, a bigger audience. They'll come down and crack down whatever you have to say about certain people that aligns with their own narrative and has their own personal relationships. That's really what I think about it in a moral sense. So yeah, those are my thoughts about the Jimmy Kimmel's opening and emotional monologue and his announcement of returning on air. So tell me what you guys think. Also, leave any of your comments down below, as I will get to my next topic, which is movie review for the movie Night of the Reapers. Let me see if I can get to that. Oh, sorry about that. All right, so the movie Night of the Reapers, uh, starring Jessica Clement, Summer Howell, Ryan Robbins as the local sheriff, Matty Finochio, Savannah Miller, and Ben Cockwell. College student Deena visits home and is roped into babysitting. The local sheriff is mailed a piece of evidence that is led on a scavenger hunt to reveal the killer of another babysitter. All right, so kind of going into my thoughts about this film and my thoughts. So, and also to give more context to this, in the wake of a brutal murder of a teenage babysitter, college student Deena returns home for the weekend and is roped into a babysitting gig of her own. Local sheriff has a mailed piece of evidence that murder may have not been an isolated incident. Led on a scavenger hunt to reveal the killer may be planning a sequel. So, in light of retrospect, Deena, who is returning home and is hired on as a babysitting gig, she encompasses a old tape footage, and also the local sheriff has his own piece of evidence that leads to one of it actually leads to one of the Deena, one of her college former college roommates and former college friends, being one of the reapers, being one of the killers of her main being one of the killers of her main sister. And then once she contacted the local authorities, and the one of the main local sheriffs, played by Ryan Robbins, he had his own piece of evidence linking the whole scene and the incident, especially linking back to Lizzie or Elizabeth being at one of his parties, and one of his bashes. So it leads to a lot of other things of violence, brutal death, and chaos. And my thoughts about this film was, I think the storytelling and I feel like the overall atmosphere was more the forefront and more of the focus than the narrative and the story of the movie itself. There are some really good moments in the beginning half of the movie. The first hour and 10 minutes was very, very interesting. It led me to a lot of second guessing. It led me to a lot of things of what was going on. Now, I feel like the main issue with this film was, I feel like we've seen this murder whodunit story before, especially as they finding pieces of evidence. Deena finding pieces of evidence that were linking to an old tape, and she ends up getting kidnapped, ends up getting tied up, and then the local sheriff and he ends up finding something that links to one of his own parties and everything leading up to it. It kind of feels a bit like we've seen this before, nonetheless. But I feel like the story was interesting, and more so than the actual movie, as far as the movie and the runtime itself and the acting, because I feel like the acting was kind of underwhelming. I didn't really like most of the acting performances besides the main character, Jessica Clement, and Ryan Robbins as a local sheriff. I felt like everybody else, all the rest of the cast, felt a bit underwhelming. It felt too dry, stalemate. It didn't really have as much nuance and flavor, and that's the thing that takes away from this movie. And this is supposed to be leading up to what we getting ready to go into the October year for Halloween coming up. So spooky season supposed to be coming, and I would have thought that this one would have been up there as far as one of the better horror films. But it turns out to not be that case whatsoever. So the main three positives that I will say is the main three pros. Number one is the acting of Ryan Robbins and Jessica Clement. Number two is the story, the overall story and the overall premise. And then number three, I do like the visuals. And the three main cons, the three main negatives. Number one, the pacing and the runtime. It felt a bit. I felt there are interesting moments, interesting aspects as far as the mystery aspect of it, the thrill, exhilarating, thrill-seeking kills at times. But I felt like the pacing and the runtime in the beginning, as far as the first 30 minutes, whether it was interesting and looking to figure out stuff, it kind of felt a bit too slow and a bit too slow pace. Number two, I felt like the rest of the cast was very, very underwhelming. Whether it be from the acting, the emotions, the facial recognition, like the range, there was not a lot of range and depth as far as the acting goes. And then number three, I felt as if it was telling two different stories. I mean, not two different stories. It was telling the movie felt like it was telling two different structures and two different stories, and it didn't really add up to the overall ending being it didn't really add to being as enjoyable, and didn't really add to being as compelling as I would have imagined. So it felt very anticlimactic, and it felt very all over the place. So my score for the film, I would give it a 2.5 out of 4 stars. It does have some interesting connective subplots and beats and narratives, but I feel as if you're looking for something as far as horror and exhilarating thrills and kills, yeah, you'll definitely go in and watch it one time, but you're not gonna remember this movie in like another week and a half or a couple weeks or so. You'll definitely forget about this one. It's very forgettable, bland, stalemate acting, and I definitely think you can find other films. If you're kind of bored, probably I'll check this out. If you're like bored, if you don't have anything else to watch from last week and before, yeah, definitely I'll check it out from that perspective. Especially since you got A Big Bold Beautiful Journey and the movie Him, which I'm not gonna talk about. Yeah, check this one out because I think this is better than some of those. But at the same time, I don't think you're gonna remember this movie in another couple weeks because I just think it has so much underwhelming acting and so much underwhelming third act that doesn't really lead to much of what can be decided. And I felt the murder who did it, who done it story. I've seen this done in at least 100-something odd movies, especially in the horror genre. So that will be my thoughts and my ratings. Tell me what you guys think down in the comment section below. I will be coming back with another movie review pretty soon, as I just seen one also the other night called The Lost Bus. So that will be coming out pretty soon. So yeah, definitely look forward to that. Or actually, maybe coming out later on today. Who knows? But yeah, thank you guys for watching, liking, and sharing, and subscribing. And appreciate the comments. I'm out. Peace.